This week on Newsnight, a look at the political maneuvering sparked by President-elect Donald Trump's decision to name several lawmakers from Florida to his incoming administration. Plus, next steps following the election of Monique Worrell to the state attorney job that she was suspended from last year. Newsnight starts now.
Hello, I'm Steve Mort. Welcome to Newsnight, where we take an in-depth look at the top stories and issues in Central Florida and how they shape our community. The Florida legislature met for an organization session this week, passing control of the state House and Senate to new leadership that'll set the agenda in Tallahassee for the next 2 years. We'll be talking a lot about that in the coming weeks, of course. As lawmakers gathered and swore in new members, including 26 new senators, Governor DeSantis was among them. In addition to helping set that legislative agenda for his final 2 years in office, the eyes of the political universe are trained on Florida's chief executive and how he might tackle special elections to replace Congressman Mike Waltz and filling Florida's U.S. Senate seat vacated by Marco Rubio. We'll talk about it in a moment with our panel, but first I sat down this week with Rollins political scientist Patrick Rickert.
Elections take time, especially when we have safe seats like we do throughout most of Florida, and so the primary elections are going to be of particular importance. They're likely going to determine who the representative is, and any candidate wants to have a fair shot at getting their campaign going.
Of course, the other task that faces the governor is replacing U.S. Senator Marco Rubio in that Senate seat, for that person to sit there till 2026 when there can be another election. I wonder what you see as the political challenges that face the governor now when it comes to naming someone to that seat for the next 2 years.
Certainly, I think one of the biggest challenges might be DeSantis' own personal ambition. We've seen before with his presidential run that he has aspirations to continue on in both Florida and national politics after his term as governor, and likely he will make a run for that seat in 2026. So there might be a personal calculus where he wants someone who is more of a placeholder than a potentially strong future opponent. Of course, probably the main consideration in his mind is who's going to be a loyal partisan, who's going to be a good Republican for the Senate in the same way that Senator Rubio was.
You can find my full interview with Patrick Rickert on our website, wcf.org/newsnight. Well, let's bring in our panel now to break it all down. Joining me in the studio this week, Nick Papantonis, General Assignment Reporter, WFTV Channel 9. It's been a while since we saw you, Nick.
Happy to be back,
Thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. Talia Blake, Morning Edition host at Central Florida Public Media. Good to see you, Talia.
Always good to see you.
And the Orlando Sentinel, Skylar Swisher. Thanks for coming back to the program, Skylar.
Thanks for having me on.
A quick note, we are recording this program on Thursday morning, so things can change by airtime, especially with a fast-moving story. Talia, let me start on this one. The governor fleshed out his plans a little bit this week on filling Senator Rubio's seat. What do we know?
Right, so he posted on X, or what formerly known as Twitter, that we're not going to know who is going to take this seat until at least January. He's going to start the interview process, kind of start vetting candidates. But in that same post on X, he said he's looking for someone who's going to help President Trump, someone who is strong on immigration and border policy, kind of someone aligning with those conservative values. So that kind of gives us a sense of who he's looking at. Rumors has it that, some of the names that are being tossed in are Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez, Ashley Moody. Some of those names are kind of being thrown in as potential people who could replace Rubio.
I mean, we talked just now with Patrick Rickert about some of those political challenges that might face the governor in replacing Senator Rubio. He's under a lot of pressure, right?
Yeah, I mean, what he's got to contend with is the Trump world, if you want to call it that, is very heavily pushing him to name his daughter, Laura Trump, to the seat. She's a well-known figure now in Republican politics, one of the leaders of the Republican Party, would obviously carry that brand and that family name in there that people are at the moment are certainly very supportive of. But as we've discussed at this point, right, he has his own ambitions. There's a little bit of speculation that he doesn't actually want the Senate seat for himself, that he likes being in the executive and might want to just focus on that presidential campaign. But it's certainly, if he wants to keep that option open for himself, the question is, does he name a loyal person under him, or does he name himself to that seat, or resign and let his lieutenant governor take over, which would preserve his legacy here in Florida, have her continue that on with the deal that she names him to that seat instead.
And certainly a lot of speculation about what Governor DeSantis' future looks like after 2026. I mean, you've been gathering local reaction, Skylar, to Matt Gaetz's nomination to be Attorney General in the Trump administration. What are your sources telling you there? And does it sort of mirror what we've heard from senators in Washington?
Yeah, so I've talked to some Florida Republicans, and they're really kind of closing ranks behind Matt Gaetz. They're saying, look, President Trump has a mandate; he should be able to kind of implement his vision. But I will say that the support is not uniform among Republicans. I interviewed Matt Staver. He is a Christian conservative lawyer with the Liberty Counsel, and he was very critical of Matt Gaetz. He says he doesn't have the experience, and he also mentioned some of the allegations of sexual misconduct that Matt Gaetz is following. He said he doesn't think that Matt Gaetz could hardly find his way around a courtroom. That's how limited his experience is.
So it does sound a lot like what we're hearing from Washington. I mean, we referenced the House Ethics Panel probe last week on the program. The panel met this week on Wednesday. I mean, do you get a sense from your reporting whether there is a growing amount of pressure for that panel's report to be made public?
Yes, I mean, there's absolutely growing pressure. Even among some, Republicans in the Senate have said that they want to see the report. I talked to an Orlando attorney, Joel Leopard, who represents two women who testified to the House Ethics Committee, and he was saying his clients very much would like to see this report made public, and they also don't want to have to go through, a public testimony in the Senate.
Governor DeSantis has vowed to move quickly to call special elections to replace Gaetz and, of course, Mike Waltz in Volusia County as well. But he does face some constraints, right, on how fast he can act. I mean, not least because of the state's recent law on mail-in ballots.
Yeah, I mean, he can't just do this overnight. There's a process that has to be followed, and that's what's going to limit him here. The timeline between the qualifying period, letting voters know all the steps that need to happen in an election. You're not going to be looking at anything beyond or before early to mid-February at minimum, probably stretching into March, just depending on the timing. So it's not like they're going to start the session on January 3rd with all of these Republicans from Florida suddenly able to step in.
And of course now Floridians have to register for mail-in ballots each election cycle, so that can also spin out the time. Tali, let me wrap up with you on this one. I mean, could Gaetz and Waltz both leaving Congress have a knock-on effect on Florida politics? I mean, it seems like you could have a sort of a cascading effect if state reps want to jump in on those seats.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of anybody's game at this point. And if someone who's already sitting in a seat decides to put themselves up for this new seat, then that could make another special election. You kind of just have that domino effect keep going and going. So it's, anybody's game right now.
There's certainly a lot of knock-on effects possible. Okay, next I wanted to talk about a story that Nick and the team at WFTV Channel 9 broke about the Orange County Supervisor of Elections office headed by Glenn Gilzine. The reporting focuses on millions of dollars of spending by the office, including $2.1 million for scholarships named for Gilzine himself and $1.9 million for job training. The County Commission has been having a look at all that spending and whether it was appropriate, and on Tuesday during a commission meeting, Mayor Demings accused the election supervisor of bad governance.
It became clear to me that it was an inappropriate use and designation of county funds. Now, that remains to be proven. I believe that we have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers to make certain that when we set and make decisions about how to spend the taxpayer dollars, that we hold true to that. If we get into a situation where we allow the constitutional officers, after they have come in good faith and said to us they will want funds to be spent in a certain way, we have to hold them accountable to that. We cannot or should not allow them to request funds for one thing and use them for something else.
Mayor Demings there. Okay, Nick, let's get into this one and let's back up a little bit and talk about these individual pots of spending. Let's start with that 2.1 million scholarship fund to Valencia College. Firstly, what was that supposed to achieve?
So that was supposed to allow students from disadvantaged communities, we're talking Evans and Jones High Schools on the west side of Orlando, they would be able to study at Valencia cost-free for as long as that money lasted. So that was $2.1 million. That is a significant chunk compared to other scholarships that are offered. It was limited to students, though, not just from those geographic areas, also going into cybersecurity and other types of fields similar to that, to try, in a word, advance the election office's goals of making elections more secure.
There was also 1.9 million on job training through CareerSource?
Yep, so this was money that, according to these two sides here, was going to allow the 100+ temporary elections workers that worked for the office this year to get retrained to find more permanent opportunities. The elections office spokesman told me in a conversation over the phone that I had with him that they are good workers, quality staff. They didn't want to let them go, but you can't run an elections office with that many people for an entire cycle. So this was through the election savings that they had last year, according to them. This was just to help those workers get another step up.
Okay, so people might say these all sound like admirable spending goals or admirable goals. The Orange County Supervisor of Elections says it doesn't need permission to spend the money that was sort of left over in the budget. The county says that money, though, should go back into the general fund, right? What are the county's attorneys saying about it?
I mean, nobody's arguing that these aren't admirable, right? Helping students, especially from disadvantaged communities, helping temporary workers find a permanent job. No one is arguing that point, and it is presented for some people a little bit of a moral, like, it's a little icky, right? At the end of the day, though, the county and just about everybody involved outside of the elections office is talking about the fact that there is a process that needs to be followed. That the county commissioners are the ones that hold the purse strings and are able to say, this is what we want the money to go towards in a vague sense. And the constitutional officers, including an elections officer, should follow that. So they are looking at different options right now to try and get that money back. And the primary concern, really, if you want to take a step back from it, this might be admirable. But I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were discussing the hypothetical of, well, a sheriff, if this was allowed, a sheriff could take money that was meant for getting new equipment or victim services and use that to buy a helicopter, or in the name of recruitment, put an ad on the Las Vegas Sphere. I mean, that's a bit of a ridiculous comparison, but that is what essentially could be allowed if precedent is set.
I mean, what are some of those remedies that the commission is looking at? And what has Glenn Gulzine himself said? Is his office pushing back?
So, I mean, his office certainly is. Their mind right now is that he had the authority. The law does not say that he can't reallocate his funds, according to him. And he should be able to take the money the commission gives him and, as a constitutional officer, use that how he sees fit, especially if there's money left over at the end of the year, and as long as he returns any unspent funds by October 1st. So the county, though, disagrees. They say the law doesn't allow him to do what he did. And so he's looking at, they're looking at right now potentially a lawsuit against him, a restraining order just to cover the 6 weeks that he has left in office. They're really going to rely on the incoming supervisor, Karen Castor-Dentel, to help them get that money back, asking Valencia for it back, asking CareerSource to return it. And then there's the longer term future, where I was talking to a state senator last night, Jason Broder. This is Wednesday night. And we're talking about the fact that he's having conversations up in Tallahassee right now about the fact that this is not something that anybody foresaw and thought about. It's never happened before. And he's also worried about a precedent and wants to make sure that the law is very clear that the commissioners are the ones that have this authority, not an election supervisor.
Well, your reporting on this has been excellent. I hope you keep at it. Of course, Glenn Gulzine had a fairly controversial run-up to his time in the Supervisor of Elections office.
Yeah, I mean, Glenn Gulzine has kind of been a bit of a jack of all trades. He's a close ally to Governor DeSantis, and he was serving on the Ethics Commission. He was the chairman of the Ethics Commission. That's an unpaid position, but it's a very politically influential post to hold. And he was named to lead the Disney District, the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District.
That replaced Reedy Creek.
Exactly, and the issue that came up there was that you cannot serve on the Ethics Commission and hold public employment.
Yeah.
And he didn't resign his post on the Ethics Commission. It took several months and pressure, quite frankly, from the media before he resigned that post.
It's certainly been an interesting path for sure. Nick, what happens next? What do we know? We had a meeting on Tuesday of the Orange County Commission. Do we get a sense of the path forwards now?
I think that at this point, it's the county and the attorneys that have to make the next move. We don't have a sense of timing. We know things are being drafted right now. I don't think they've fully committed to any particular path forward, though they say they do have a path. So we'll be watching to see what's filed in the courts. If anybody from outside of the situation also decides to step in and file, we've heard a little speculation that might happen as well. But at this point, the clock is ticking. They know that they have to get something done. And put the bite into the bark, that, if you want to call it that. But I have not heard yet that it's going to be coming tomorrow, next week, anything like that. The only time frame that we are certain of right now is the fact that Glenn Gilzean has 6 weeks left. Karen Castor-Dentel is preparing to take over and potentially preparing to take some actions in her first week, including asking the comptroller to audit that office to make sure there's nothing that hasn't been uncovered already.
And of course, Karen Castor-Dentel was at that meeting on Tuesday. Mayor Deming seems pretty exercised by all of this and has said essentially that he thanked yourself for bringing this to their attention, right? This does go sort of to the point of why local accountability reporting is so important.
You know, it was somebody came forward and let us know that this was going on. And it was a chance, because when I called everybody at the county, they had never heard of this. So this was a chance for them to get ahead of it, to get the pep rallies, get ahead of those pep rallies, because had that announcement happened and you had the video of the students cheering and all of that, it potentially would have been a lot harder for the county to make the moves that it's now making because of the optics of it.
Important reporting, Nick, and I hope you keep across that story. We'll certainly be watching it here on Newsnight. Be sure to join the conversation, meanwhile, on social media. We're at WCF TV on Facebook and Instagram. We're also on X at Newsnight WUCF. Okay, next tonight, the failure of Amendment 4, which sought to enshrine abortion rights in Florida's Constitution. Despite receiving 57% of the vote, the measure fell short of the required 60% threshold. The political committee that led the drive to pass Amendment 4, Floridians Protecting Freedom, is now fighting with the state over fines related to its petition gathering process. Newsnight's been getting reaction from both sides on the abortion issue in Florida. First, you'll hear from Andrew Shervill, Executive Director of Florida Voice for the Unborn, followed by Barbara Dravecki, Interim CEO of Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida.
The governor's office leveled the playing field to an extent by promoting the truth about what Florida's laws on abortion actually did, and that was to protect the life and health of the mother. And so no women have died as a result of Florida's Heartbeat Protection Act. And the insinuations and the really kind of outrageous claims made by the Florida abortion industry in the last 6 weeks in their advertisement campaign needed to be exposed for what they were, and that was complete and total lies.
At this point, with the 6-week near abortion ban, we will continue to assist women who must be navigated out of the state to get the care that they need. We have a lot of work to do in reconvening about what will happen when we look at the legislature coming back into session. With 57% of Floridians, which is a majority of Floridians in almost every county in the state of Florida, we know that the majority of Floridians want a change in the availability for women to be able to access abortion care, and that this near total 6-week abortion ban just simply is not what Floridians want.
Barbara Dravecki there. Okay, well, Talia, let me start with you on this one and a decision by abortion opponents to drop those lawsuits, right, alleging fraud in the petition gathering process by Amendment 4 advocates. Remind us what those lawsuits were alleging in the first place.
Right, so just like you talked about, kind of that petition gathering process of fraud. And then also they were saying that the group who supported the amendment, Floridians Protecting Freedom, that they were illegally paying workers based on the amount of signatures they got. So there was a lot of a lot happening there, but really after the election, you saw those lawsuits get dropped.
I mean, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when you were on the program, Skylar, but you've written about it since, I think. Do you think that the defeat of Amendment 4 and Trump's win, for that matter, could affect the political landscape in our state on this issue, particularly with the positioning of future candidates on abortion rights?
Right now, I'm not seeing much of a shift, and we can kind of take a look at Senate President Al Britton, the incoming Senate President. I mean, he said it's a definitive no in terms of revisiting abortion. I think what we're more likely to see with this legislative session might be bills to further regulate the petition gathering process to try to thwart a future ballot initiative, abortion rights ballot initiative from being approved.
Yeah, and do we see pro-choice advocates, Nick, looking to new strategies to try to sort of advance their cause, and how are they kind of addressing the realities now in our state that 6-week ban is in place?
I think they're still, for the most part, picking up the pieces right now and trying to figure out what the path forward is, because 60%, as it's being seen here, is just such a big hurdle to overcome. Yeah. And to Skylar's point, the Florida legislature really doesn't have to listen to the voters right now in terms of, especially in terms of this issue. They're not calling this a loss, even though they didn't get the milestone they wanted. The fact that they did get 57% shows that Florida is on their side, at least in terms of the people that came out to vote. But how you advance this issue, it's probably going to be more of a long-term ground game of shifting opinion enough to get either the legislature to act or to try, frankly, another very expensive petition measure that could involve additional restrictions the next time around.
And do we get a sense, Talia, about next steps for abortion opponents in Florida?
Well, I mean, kind of just to Skylar's point, too, that the incoming Senate president, he's not looking to change anything. So I think we're just going to see that 6-week ban hold for a while. I don't see any changes. They're kind of just happy that it's held past the election and it's going to keep holding up.
It'll be interesting to see how those two sides kind of move forward with their campaigns as we go forward. A reminder to be sure to catch every episode of Newsnight alongside much more content from the program. It's all on our website, wcf.org/Newsnight. Finally tonight, on election night, Monique Worrell reclaimed her position as state attorney for Orange and Osceola counties, defeating Andrew Bain. Governor Ron DeSantis had previously suspended Worrell and appointed Bain in her place, citing neglect of duty and incompetence. This summer, the Florida Supreme Court upheld that decision. Talia, the Worrell case has been the subject of legal challenges, right, as I just mentioned, including a case decided right after the election itself happened.
Mm-hmm. Right. So a federal judge rejected that lawsuit over DeSantis' decision to suspend her. It was brought by two of Worrell's supporters. The judge basically said that they didn't really have legal standing for what they were trying to argue. So he kind of dropped those cases. Now, the fact that the case was dropped 3 days after the election is something to note. The judge didn't say it was because of the election, but it is interesting timing.
Nick, you talked with Monique Worrell before the election, I think. What did she tell you she would do if returned to office, which in fact she was?
Her overall message centers around this idea that she calls smart justice. So it's not putting every single person behind bars that she possibly can, which is where some of that criticism came from the DeSantis and other camps, is the fact that she's not willing to do that. It's the idea that you can divert some of those lower level crimes. You can try to find solutions that doesn't involve just lock everybody up and throw away the key. So that is her overall message. She is going to be looking to reverse some of the policies that Bain put in place. But after you get past the surface level, there is a lot of continuity between the two camps other than the staff that is now present inside that office. And so I expect we're going to see some staff turnover. She gets more people in that she wants, and there's just some natural attrition with the changeover. It's going to be interesting to see what she decides which direction she decides to move the office in, because it's not like it's been a complete 180.
I mean, she's been sort of one of the figureheads, if you like, of this sort of progressive prosecutor movement that the governor has been pushing back against.
She's not rejecting that label. And there is the possibility and the speculation that he will remove her again. There is a hurdle in DeSantis' way that he has to have a reason to do it. And so, is it going to happen on the first day, especially with this distraction of having Senate seats to fill and special elections? I imagine she'll wind up taking her seat. I could be very wrong on that front. But one of those things is malfeasance, misfeasance, neglect of duty, and it could potentially be there's a memo drafted, and all that he needs is one excuse to fill in that memo and sign his name, and it could be somebody else running that office. And she's willing to accept that reality if that comes true.
It is interesting that we haven't heard anything yet from the governor on this. The Sentinel, I think, Skylar, talked to Worrell after her win. What's she been telling your outlet?
Yeah, what she told us is that she feels vindicated, and she's hopeful that Governor DeSantis will honor the will of the voters.
I mean, I do wonder whether the governor will simply remove Monique Worrell again, especially given that the courts thus far have gone in the governor's favor when it comes to challenges to both her suspension and the one in Hillsborough County.
And just to be clear, it's not necessarily that they've gone in his favor, it's that they have determined that it's not their responsibility, right? And the system that we have relies on checks and balances. And as we've seen over the past couple of years in Florida, the legislature is not much of a check on the governor right now. And so they've determined that Worrell's removal was not lawful, but they've also determined that they didn't have the power to reinstate her. And so that's what DeSantis has going for him in this regard. It does become a little bit more complicated that the voters have now returned her. They've made their voice very clear on this matter. But at the end of the day, the bully pulpit that the governor has with this, the fact that he does not like to have any finger poked in his eye in this regard. He could very well do this again, potentially put in somebody that's a little bit more palatable to voters, maybe a moderate Democrat or somebody that's already in that office, just to say, I got rid of, quote unquote, the problem.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see what happens as it gets nearer to time for Monique Worrell to resume her position. And I'm sure you guys will be keeping an eye on it as we go forward. But that is all the time we have for this week. My thanks to Nick Papantonis, WFTV, Channel 9, Talia Blake, Central Florida Public Media, Skylar Swisher from the Orlando Sentinel. Thank you guys so much for coming in. Really appreciate your time today. Good to see you. We'll see you next Friday night at 8:30 here on WCF. In the meantime, from all of us here at Newsnight, take care and have a great week.